All right, so let's talk a little bit about Hanukkah. So for Hanukkah, we know that there were two main miracles that happened. One was a war between the Syrian Greeks, a very large army, and the small ragtag militia of the Maccabees. And we know that the Maccabees, they won this war. So that was miracle number one. Miracle number two, which there's many debates on how to explain it, we're going to go with one opinion today, which is that the Greeks contaminated all the oil that was found in the holy sanctuary in Jerusalem. But we found one jar of oil that was still intact, that was not contaminated, and still had the seal of the Kohen Gadol. Now, when you compare these two miracles, the oil miracle seems very insignificant compared to the war. Given, with or without this miracle, there would probably still be a Jewish people. But you can't really say the same thing about the war. If we would have lost the war, there might have not been a Jewish people. So why is it that so much of our practice in commemoration focuses around the oil miracle? So an answer that we can maybe suggest is, in that actuality, if you look at Jewish history, there's been many times where the Jews have defeated a larger enemy. We even maybe have in recent history things like the 1948 war and the Six-Day War. It doesn't mean they're not miracles. Now, if you go with this line of thinking, you're thinking to yourself, well, what kind of answer is that? Because you haven't explained the chashivus of the miracle of the oil. So let's pull from the Sheni Shmuel, and let's try to build on the miracle of the oil. So what then is unique about the holiday of Hanukkah? So the Sheni Shmuel says that in general, when it comes to wine, idolaters, when they touch wine, and there's a lot of specifications, okay? There's not a halacha here, but when idolaters touch wine, a Jew cannot drink that wine anymore. But when it comes to oil, like if an idolater touches olive oil, for example, a Jew may now use that oil. It's not necessarily rendered impure. Now, in Jewish thought, oil is a reference to wisdom. So let's continue to build on this. So you see, the Sheni Shmuel says that many nations prior to the Greeks, they tried to oppress the Jews. And their endeavors were more based on force. And they weren't super philosophical endeavors. They were, become a vassal state to me, become a tributary state to me. Either A, it was in the realm of money, they wanted to oppress us to take money from us, or B, they wanted to just oppress us to show that they're strong. Now, the Greeks were a little bit different than this. The Greeks were a very philosophical people. In fact, take a look. No other nation in world history, perhaps, has had more impact on wisdom than the Greeks. Everything from architecture to art to all these great works like the Odyssey, and you have Plato and Socrates and Aristotle. So the Greeks, their singular focus was much, much more on getting the world to accept their way of thinking than it was maybe like tributaries and power. Not that those things didn't also exist with the Greeks too. And they were very successful at this. And at the heart of their idea, people like Aristotle articulated that anything that could not be understood, meaning by those people like Aristotle, doesn't exist. It is not worth knowing about. And if you look at that statement implies a humongous level of arrogance. And if you read their works, no doubt, look at their works, they all smack of arrogance. And they were very successful in spreading these arrogant teachings throughout the entire world. In fact, many Jews became Hellenists. So this says the Sheni Shmuel is the meaning of the phrase Timu kol hashemanim shebechecha. They corrupted all wisdom in the Holy of Holies. Meaning the shemen, oil, means wisdom. And the Greeks went around with their arrogant types of teachings and started polluting the minds of the entire world and of the Jewish people. And they were a unique threat, meaning most idolaters do not have this ability and do not have the ability to affect the Jewish minds in the ways that the Greeks did, because they're not really focused so much on intellectual thought. They're more focused on wealth or honor or strength. But the Greeks were unique, so this made them unique. Like a war is a little less unique. Many people have tried to go to war against the Jewish people, but this idea of coming and using philosophy and intellectual debate to try to poison the Jewish people, that made the Greeks unique. Now, their wisdom falls short, though, because at the end of the day, it's hallowed. It seems complex from the outside, but it is lacking because it is based on arrogance and pride. And the verse in the Torah says, Reish is Chachma, Yiras Hashem. True wisdom is Yiras Hashem. True wisdom is fear of God. it comes through fear and humility, and the Greeks didn't have this. So they could only go so far in corrupting the minds of the Jewish people. And we say that there was one jar of oil that had the seal of the Kohen Gadol still intact. That jar represents Yiras Hashem, the wisdom that can only be attained with fear of God, the final boss, so to speak. That they were unable to spoil. All the other jars they were able to get to, but that one they had no ability to get to, because that jar was sealed with the seal of Aaron, one of the most humble human beings to ever grace the face of the earth. Somebody who didn't obtain his stature as the great Kohen Gadol because he was so smart, but because he was humble. And in fact, we can use these ideas to answer another question. I heard somebody ask to Rabbi Shea Tahan about AI. Will AI take over the world? And I think the Shem Yishmael would agree with his answer. No. You see, Hashem revealed the secrets to Moshe Rabbeinu of the red heifer, the paraduma, but to nobody else did he reveal them to. Why? Because of his humility. That's the answer that's given. Because Moshe was so humble, he was able to obtain this type of wisdom. And think about it. Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, they argue throughout the whole Talmud. And it even says in the Talmud that Beis Shammai was smarter than Beis Hillel. Yet, the halacha always follows Beis Hillel. Why? One of the reasons is because Beis Hillel was so extremely humble. So halacha and wisdom, they don't follow necessarily the smartest person in the room. They go by humility. So let us recap this whole thing, okay? Yes, we won a war against the odds, but that sometimes happens. It's still a miracle. However, the Greeks posed a unique threat to the Jewish minds that perhaps nobody has been able to replicate since, because of their unique singular focus on wisdom. People like Aristotle, Plato, Socrates. We mentioned that idolaters don't contaminate oil normally, but the Greeks, because of their unique focus on philosophy and wisdom, they were able to. And that oil is a reference to wisdom in Judaism. So they were not only corrupting physical oil, but they were also corrupting wisdom and intelligence. And they almost made it up to complete contamination. Because of their lack of humility, they fell short. Perhaps that for many Jews, this in itself was a revelation. Meaning, many Jews thought they were Hellenists, right? Many Jews thought that Greek wisdom was higher than Jewish wisdom. And they assumed those old Jewish ideas, they'll be proven wrong and they'll die out. But when they saw that the miraculous one jug was still found with the seal of the Kohen Gadol representing humility, they realized that Greek wisdom can only take you so far, which by definition means it is limited, which means at the end of the day, it was sheker. And maybe this incident of finding that jug of oil brought many, many Jews back to Judaism. It made them abandon, perhaps, their Hellenist thoughts. So let's all have a Freilich and Hanukkah. Let's try to have Yira, because Yira brings us to wisdom. And let's try to follow in the footsteps of our ancestors. So Freilich and Hanukkah.